the last time we spoke, you were in Paris for this big AI summit, and you had just put out as Anthropic this big bit of research about the sorts of jobs that AI might augment and the sorts of jobs that AI might sort of bluntly might replace. One of the things you said was about the impact AI might have on entry-level white-collar jobs. Now, obviously, with a big caveat that we are talking about hypotheticals, we're talking about the future. But could you just outline what you think that impact might potentially be?
When I think about AI technology and the fact that as it gets better, again, if we don't handle this well, we have a choice here. I'm not saying we're fated for the bad outcomes, but if we don't handle this well, I am worried that that fast growth could be coupled with job displacement for a lot of people, that you could get a much bigger pie, but also that pie could be concentrated more in a smaller number of people, and there could be some people who don't get any. Um, that is my concern. And specifically, if we look at jobs like, as you said, entry level white collar work, I think of people who work at law firms, like first year associates. There's a lot of document review. It's very repetitive, but every example is different. That's something that AI is quite good at. If you think of, first year at, entry level work at a consulting company, the typical entry level white collar work, right? If you think of a lot of kind of entry level administrative work, right? People who coordinate things, who schedule things, who organize things, who take notes. If you think of entry level work at a finance company, right? Doing routine analysis of financial documents, right? These are kind of the workhorses of entry level white collar labor. And yet they're things that AI is already pretty good at, and AI is rapidly getting better at. And so when I made those statements, you're exactly as you said, I was talking not about the present, not about things that are happening now, but things that I think are going to happen in the near future. I use the period of 1 to 5 years because while the technology I can kind of see ahead, the economy is a little bit more messy. So I'm not sure about this, and I'm definitely not sure about the period in which it's happening.
On some of the more potentially alarming or concerning areas, which you give equal time and thought to, a recent test of one of your models found that at times it wrote special code to stop itself being shut down. A recent version of Google's Gemini model, according to Google, is approaching the point where it could potentially carry out cyber attacks, and some AI models, according to some tests, are becoming increasingly proficient at the skills needed to create biological and other weapons. Now, that all sounds scary to a lot of people, and again, we're talking about a small sliver of the total amount of work going on in AI. But don't those seemingly isolated examples, Dario, suggest that we're already at the stage today, where this technology is running away from us, in some specific instances?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I am concerned, and
Well,
I
that
think
sounds like we're losing control.
so I want to be clear. Most of these things that you cite are things that happened in tests, not in the real world. And in many cases, I think the majority of those examples were tests that Anthropic deliberately ran and then openly disclosed to the public.
Yeah. You
So,
wanted
for
to be
example,
upfront about this stuff. Yeah, I get that.
we want to be absolutely upfront about what is happening. So it does not mean that these things are happening already in the real world in most cases, although I'll get to some cases of some real world things we have found. But it's a forewarning. It tells us that these things are possible, are these things are now possible in the lab, which means that before too long, it may be possible for them to happen in the real world. And the reason we're openly disclosing them to everyone, the reason we're talking about these things for everyone, is that we want to make sure that both we ourselves and the other companies who develop the technology can correct the technology, can develop defenses, right? If you don't understand what the problems are, you certainly cannot fix them. And second, we are making policymakers aware that these risks exist. And we are doing so in order that they take action. And, we can get to that in the future, but we've been very active in arguing for regulation of the technology. Now, one thing I said is that Most of this is happening in the lab, but some things are happening in the real world. One thing is that, and we just published something on this last week, we announced just last week that we had disrupted a bunch of operations to use our model Claude for cyber attacks. So this is something, again, we found, we shut it down. We're effectively defending against it, but people were using it to make ransomware attacks. The North Korean state was using it basically to sign up for fake jobs, to get through job interviews, to get around economic sanctions. Again, all stuff we shut down, but this is happening. This is happening in the real world.
And in your statement, you said it's happening to what we believe, quote unquote, Anthropic, to what we believe is an unprecedented degree. Could you just spell out what was it? What was it that you found that was going on? You mentioned the North Korean example, but so other people know about how this technology is potentially currently being misused and abused. What was it that you found?
Specifically, so what we found, there were several different things, but one of the things we found was that people were using our model Claude, which is, it's very good at writing code. So because it's very good at writing code, it can also potentially be used to hack into things. Claude has a bunch of guardrails that prevents it from being used for malicious purposes. But there are things called jailbreaks that people can use to get around those guardrails. And we're always trying to tamp down on jailbreaks to kind of prevent them. But similar to security vulnerabilities, the bad actors are always trying to find new jailbreaks. And so some people managed to find jailbreaks where they were able to use Claude to write malicious code. And then they were able to use that malicious code against, schools, government agencies to do ransomware attacks. A ransomware attack is where you basically lock someone out of their system and you say, we're going to delete all this, or we're going to release this data to the public unless you pay us. And so we detected that Claude was being used in this way. And of course, as soon as we detect this, we found everywhere the operations were being used and we shut it down.
Dario, a lot of people would look at the development of the internet over the last 15 or 20 years, and they would say, we have created the biggest asymmetry of power, wealth, and knowledge in human history. And that with artificial intelligence, we're just exacerbating that. We're intensifying it, and that we haven't learned the lessons of where we got things wrong over the past 15 years. What would you say to that?
So, I couldn't agree more with this, at least as a risk, at least with, I think what you're describing is what will happen if we go down the wrong path. But I think we can find a better path. And I think that better path depends on being honest about the pros and cons of the technology, about the risks and benefits, and advocating for responsible management of the technology by the companies, by the governments of the world. I am equally baffled as you, that we have had 10 or 15 years of all the negative effects that we've seen of the internet and social media. And then when we get to AI, there are folks, again, some of them affiliated with AI companies, some of them affiliated with investors that are financially conflicted, making super PACs to, lobby the US government, state governments, international governments to deregulate the technology. When we just talked about all the dangers that are present in this technology, all the ones that Anthropic works so hard to bring to light to the public.